Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Keane, best-selling author of the book, The Fitness Mindset, and Rewire Your Mindset, here to help you by deconstructing expert guests on all things health, fitness, and mindset. Today's guests are Stephen Campolo and Peter Tzemis on fat loss, nutrition principles, managing your mindset for weight loss, and the 77 laws of six-pack abs. This is an incredibly enjoyable conversation, and the boys have written a new book, The 77 Laws of Six-Pack Abs. And although very similar to like the 4-Hour Workweek book by Tim Ferriss, this book goes a lot deeper than what you would think. And there is some incredible stuff in here, from the mindset side of fat loss and, training for getting your body fat low enough to see your abs or get a six-pack, to the training side, to the nutrition, to the recovery, to the supplementation. It covers it from a very holistic point of view. And in today's podcast, we break down some of those laws. So we talk about the mindset for weight loss and creating a new self-image, and how to take responsibility, take ownership to make any changes. And then we go into the nooks and crannies of fat loss nutrition principles. So things like managing the weekend. So if you fall off Monday to Friday, or you're really good eating, Monday to Friday, and you fall off at the weekend, how to work through that. And little tips like, not eating in front of the TV, and then mastering the calorie game and bumping up your protein so that you're increasing your chance of success. And then we dissect some of the strategies or techniques that you could potentially use, like, flexible dieting or restricting your feeding window in terms of intermittent fasting, and using, strategic refeeds instead of cheating, or potentially, feasting at nighttime where you save your meals and bank them for later in the day. Lots of different tools that can potentially get you to the same main goal. And we also talk about the training side of fat loss. So focusing on building muscle, metabolic resistance training, starting with compounded movements, and how to use progressive overload to do that. There's so much value in today's episode. There's a little bit of a mic issue with the boys, so you may notice that the sound quality is about 70 to 80% what it would normally be, but there's so much value in today's podcast. I think even if it was muffled, it would still be worth listening to, in my opinion. So without further ado, here is Stephen Campolo and Peter Tzemis on fat loss nutrition principles, managing your mindset for weight loss, and the 77 laws of six-pack abs. Enjoy. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm delighted to be joined today with my two guests and authors of the new book, The 77 Laws of Six-Pack Abs, Stephen Campolo and Peter Tzemis. Stephen lost 100 pounds himself and specialises in coaching people to lose between 20 and 70 pounds in a 3 to 6 month time period, and has over 1,200 transformations. Peter is a best-selling author, storyteller and copywriter. He also runs the popular marketing blog beatyourcontrol.com. Their new book is for anyone who's trained themselves into the ground but still can't get a six-pack. I'm looking forward to talking all things nutrition, fat loss, and six-pack misconceptions in general in today's episode. Peter, Stephen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Brian. Nice to be here.
Yeah, awesome. I'm excited.
Lads, I'm really looking forward to this. Again, with the title of your book, automatically your mind goes to, right, ab training and get your body fat down as low as possible. But you've taken a very holistic approach. Like, you've broken the book into multiple parts: mindset, nutrition, training, rest, recovery, supplement, and success laws. So I love that. And we're going to unpack those as we go through the podcast. But before we do that, and we might start with you, Peter, how did the book come about? Where did the idea come from? And who were you writing it specifically for?
I was quite overweight for most of my life, and I had gone through tons of different, diets, keto, paleo, all different training programs, 5x5, Muscle for Life, all just millions of different things. And I had a biology degree, and I still couldn't lose the weight. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Because weight loss is pretty simple. It comes down to calories in, calories out, energy expenditure. But when we actually look at it, it does have a huge mindset component, and that's kind of what's holding me back. A lot of the book's focus is on like those little tactics and the behavior changes that you need to kind of achieve the end goal of six-pack abs. And that's what it was. I was writing to my former fat kid self on the book that I could have wanted or needed to get those results without just like, hey, just count some calories and move more,
And Steve, let's jump into the mindset side then, because I think both of you have kind of very similar stories in terms of the book is out there to help people, and the reason it came about and the kind of holistic approach you've taken is based on your own journeys, based on your own histories, and all the people that, between the two of you, you've worked with and helped over the years, either one in capacity as trainers or in the book or online space. But talk about the mindset and the importance of that. And what I love the most about the book, as somebody who's very heavy on the mindset side of weight training, fat loss, weight loss, body compositional goals, when I work with people, you opened the book with the mindset laws. It's the first part. Talk to us, Steve, about the mindset component of the book.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest the biggest issue in the fitness industry is that no one really talks about the mindset when it's really the most powerful thing, and really like the biggest thing that's going to dictate someone's success in regards to losing weight and keeping it off and actually living a healthy lifestyle is, getting your mindset right. Because let's face it, right? Like in fitness, all you see is, hey, eat less food, move your body more, right? Well, if it was that simple, then we wouldn't have the highest obesity rates in the world here in the States, right? So clearly there's some other issues going on. And, mindset is I would say, like 70% of the battle is getting in the right mindset. Because just going from experience, it's like, I've struggled with my weight when I was younger. I was 100 pounds overweight. And, really like my identity was so wrapped up in just being a fat guy, right? So what people have to realize is that like you have to start seeing yourself as a fit person, start living out a fit lifestyle, and almost have an identity shift. Because if you stay stuck with an old identity and an old mindset, you'll never be able to get to where you want to be in regards to your fitness, right? So strengthening the mind, going through that process, I feel is the biggest and most important component when it comes to starting a new lifestyle, starting a new fitness journey.
Steve mentioned the identity shift there, Peter. When it comes to mindset misconceptions, because you've talked about 22 laws that are all based on the mindset, what's one of the biggest one that jumps out to you, Peter, specifically when it comes to the mindset around weight loss, around fat loss, around getting six-pack, around getting the body composition you want? What's the biggest mindset misconception that you find holds people back?
And talk about this in law number 3, which is we call define success before you chase it. I think most people don't have clear goals of what they want, because the reality is dieting for weight loss, for example, is different than eating healthy. Yes, they can overlap, but they're not always the same kind of end goal and result. And so you kind of need to be crystal clear on what your goal is. And then every action you take, whether you go to the grocery store, whether you go to the gym, has to be kind of in line with achieving that specific goal. Eating healthy, again, like, yeah, you can have a lot of salmon and vegetables and, grass-fed meats, and, that could be a lot of fat, which is a lot of calories, which kind of, sure, it's healthy, but it's not going to help you with your end goal, which is why I say define success before you chase it.
Yeah, that gives us a really nice segue when we go into the nutrition section, because that's definitely something that could hold people back with a fat loss goal, a six-pack goal, just a body compositional goal in general. Steve, what's your favorite mindset law out of all the 22?
It's hard to say, but honestly, I think the most important one is going to be like law number 1 is take responsibility, right? When it comes down to it, it's like when you look in the mirror, your body, your weight, your image is a reflection of, what you've been doing and consuming over the past years, right? So if you're overweight, if out of shape, it's like at the end of the day, you can blame whoever you want. You could blame, the TV commercials for, showing fast food. You could blame McDonald's. You could blame your family. You could blame your wife, because she has snacks and goodies in the house for the kids. But at the end of the day, it's like we're all responsible for what goes in our bodies. We're all responsible for, if we choose to exercise and, stay healthy, move our bodies every day. So at the end of the day, it's like you have to take responsibility for where you are right now and realize that you have the power to change it moving forward. Because if you keep blaming other people or blaming other, circumstances for where you are in your life, then you're always just going to place the blame when you fall short or when you fail. So the first rule always, and the most important, take responsibility for where you are, because once you do that, then you can navigate moving forward and actually, create an action plan to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think taking ownership, taking responsibility, because everything comes down to that. Everything that's built after a body compositional change comes down to owning it first and not blaming other people. I think that's such valuable feedback for people, or things to consider. Peter, what about you? What's been your favorite, or what has been your most helpful mindset law?
Honestly, for me, it's been there's a law 18. It was called beat the window of intensity. And that's my favorite one, I think, because everyone goes through these kind of cycles of cravings. And as long as you kind of get past that 15-minute window of what we call the window of intensity, you can overcome pretty much any craving. Because we both know, or we all know that, a binge, for example, starts with like 1 or 2 cookies, right? And so if you can beat that kind of like that window of intensity, you can kind of win the game of dieting and fitness and ultimately six-pack abs.
I love it. And one of my favorites personally, which I'm going to get you, Steve, to speak to, if that's okay, is manage the weekend. I know a lot of people struggle with the weekend. If I had €1 or $1 or £1 for every time someone said I'm brilliant Monday to Friday, but just I press the fuck it button or I fall off track at the weekend, as opposed to, you know, I'm brilliant 7 days a week. So I think manage the weekend, which is law 20, is a really valuable one. Steve, can you speak to that?
Yeah. So, you know, this chapter was really written, I feel like, for me personally, because when I first started my weight loss journey, you know, I would severely undereat, right? I would overdo cardio. I would severely undereat all week. But I always knew, like, on Sunday that I was going to have like my big, you know, like cheat day, right? I grew up in an Italian home. So Sunday is like notorious for being like pasta, meatballs, like desserts. And I would kill myself all week. But then on Sunday, I would just like almost like look like an engorged tick, right? Just stuffing my face from morning till night. And I was literally like undoing all of the hard work from the week before. I mean, I was probably consuming like 10,000, 15,000 calories in that one day. And, you know, I realized, and, you know, over years of working with people, it's like the weekend is a lot more difficult to navigate for a lot of people because they don't have that structure in place like they do during the week, right? During the week, most people, you know, they're on more of a schedule. They go to work at a certain time. They go to the gym at a certain time. They're able to, you know, kind of have more discipline with their food. You know, they can meal prep a little bit. And then when the weekend comes and now, you know, maybe you're not working, the kids are home from school, you have more social events, you're going out to eat, you're going, you know, out to drinks with friends, the kids have, you know, sporting events. And it's a lot harder to have that structure in place. So like one of my favorite quotes is saying, you know, don't let the weekend be your weekend, right? So again, if you're going to be busting your butt during the week and, you know, eating healthy and getting your exercise in, it's like you don't want it to all fall apart on the weekend either, right? So that's why it's really important to be intentional about going into your weekend. Have some type of structure. You know, for me personally, like Saturday morning, the first thing I do is I wake up, have my coffee, and get my butt to the gym for like an hour. This way I know at least my workout's done and I can kind of navigate the rest of the day. But, you know, if you fail to plan, it's like, you know, plan to fail, right? So you have to just have more structure, more organization going into the weekend, because if not, you know, more often than not, like you're not going to be able to navigate it successfully.
I love that line. Don't let your weekend become your weekend. It's really powerful in its simplicity as well, because there's so many of us, myself included, that when I was on body compositional journeys where you'd fall down at the weekend just because you were out of that same routine. Steve mentioned there, Peter, that he felt like that chapter was written for him. What was your biggest struggle when you were on your body compositional journey?
You know, I do think it was all about the eating in front of the TV. That was a big one for me, because, you know, as you know, kind of like when you eat in front of the TV, there's something called distracted eating. And so your brain actually doesn't release like the proper hunger hormones to kind of make you feel satiated. And so once I stopped doing that, once I stopped just like sitting down and being present, eating a meal like as if it's a meal, like I stopped overeating almost like overnight. It was very freaky. And I do think even that just like one law, and that's the point of this whole book, is that each of the 77 laws, if everyone just did like one of the laws, they would see results. And so that one for me was a huge needle mover in my kind of life, in my body composition.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the reason the book is so powerful in terms of the law layouts is different things jump out at different people. You know, I've been very fortunate in my life that I've not had problems with weight. You know, I've had other issues in my life when it comes to body composition, a little bit of body dysmorphia and things along those lines, but never a weight loss per se. But there's parts of the book that jump out at me that I'm like, oh, you know, stay flexible with your nutrition when it comes to nutrition laws. Or, you know, at the beginning, I didn't understand basic calories when I started off. And, you know, I didn't know that I needed to bump up my protein. Or then I went to the other side where I overate on protein completely. So there's loads of different things that people fall back on regardless of their level, which kind of brings me into part 2 of the book, which is the nutrition laws. Talk to me about, when it comes to body composition, weight loss, fat loss, getting six-pack abs, talk about the importance of calories. We'll start with you, Steve, and then we'll transition over to you, Peter.
Oh boy, the good old calorie question. So, I mean, I always say this, right? Like 80% of how someone looks is determined by what they're eating, right? And just to kind of give people a quick example, and one story I love to tell is that I had one guy reach out to me about a year ago for coaching, right? And this was a guy who was getting ready for an Ironman. Now, for those that don't know, like how much training is involved getting ready for an Ironman, I think they have to run like, I don't know, 50 miles, swim 3 miles,
Yeah, I was training for an Ironman last year before it got cancelled with COVID. Just to give people context, it's a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile cycle, and a marathon to finish, so 26.2 miles. So a lot of training.
Yeah, so like you have to be a crazy person to even attempt that, right? So so he came to me and he's like, I'm preparing for this Ironman, and he was training I think like 5 or 6 hours a day. I mean, his entire full-time job was just getting ready for this Ironman. But he was still probably like 20, 30 pounds overweight, about 20% body fat. So I asked him, I'm like, with all of the training you're doing, like, why don't you think you're losing weight, right? Because again, if you're burning, like he was probably burning 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 calories a day. But the problem was that he was just eating crazy amounts of food to support his training, right? So he was snacking in between cycling and in between running and swimming. So he was eating, over the amount of calories he was burning every day, right? And this is why I always say, like, you cannot out-train a bad diet. If you're burning 5,000 calories per day in the gym, or if you're running every day, then if you're eating 6,000 calories a day, then it really doesn't matter that you're burning 5,000 calories a day, because it all comes down to a simple math equation. Are you burning more calories than you're consuming? And this is why I am such a big advocate for people tracking their calories, right? Because you have to know what your numbers are, or at least have some type of estimation, because you probably hear it all the time, right? People say, I don't know why I'm not losing weight. I'm eating healthy. I'm not eating that much food, but my weight isn't changing. Well, as soon as I have people start tracking their calories and measuring everything they're putting into their food, they realize, they're like, oh crap, like I thought I was only eating 2,000 calories a day, but now I realize I'm eating 3,500 calories a day. And now it all makes sense why I wasn't able to lose weight, right? So it does take a little bit more effort to track your calories and know those numbers. But I promise you, like, it will make all of the difference in the world, because if you are busting your butt, if you are training every day and you're not getting the results you want, well, why not put in a little bit more effort, know how many calories you're consuming? This way you can navigate your fat loss journey that much easier and with certainty.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the analogy I use when it comes to tracking calories is like saving money. Like, you don't have to check your bank account every day, but it's useful to see that you're spending $5 or €5 a day on coffee, and it helps you save if you have a goal at the end of the month. And I think tracking calories is the same. It gives you that feedback. You don't have to do it, but it greatly increases your chance of success when it comes to reducing your body fat. Peter, talk about bumping up your protein then. I think this is something that, particularly when it comes to weight loss and fat loss, people have a misconception around. I know a lot of people I've spoken to, a lot of people who listen to this podcast, some will know that the power of protein in terms of recovery, etc. But when it comes to fat loss, weight loss, they can throw it out the window a little bit, because it's all about the calories. And I think they kind of segue and they layer on top of each other what Steve said there about the calories being so important, but protein being the next thing on that level. Talk about the importance of pumping up your protein.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the magic elements of protein is that it makes you feel full, which we all know is that is the biggest issue when dieting, is the constant nagging, almost uncontrollable like hunger, right? And with protein, the more protein you eat, there's a satiety kind of impact into the brain and the body. And that's why me and Stephen preach this pump up your protein. And every meal should have, 30 grams of protein probably in it, if not more. I mean, depending, obviously, male, female, how much weight. But we try to aim for a good 20 to 30 grams at the bare minimum. But the second aspect of pumping up your protein is that your body, to digest protein properly, your body actually uses about 30% of the actual calories from protein, which automatically puts you at a 30% calorie deficit when you're just eating pure protein. And that's kind of just a little hack that everyone can use. And that's why, again, we preach protein first and then carbs, fats second, especially when you're dieting.
Yeah, I think it's so important for that recovery element between workouts, especially if you're, doing resistance training. We'll talk about metabolic resistance training later. Again, it's something you talk about. I think it's rule 43 or 44. But the power of protein in terms of the satiety effect, it keeps you feeling fuller for longer. And I think what a lot of people don't know is, when you think of a gram of protein and a gram of carbohydrate, they're the same kilocalories per gram. You get 4 kilocalories per gram versus fat, which is 9 kilocalories per gram, but also has a satiety effect, but has more than double the calories. So when it comes to reducing body fat, knowing these things are quite important. Talk about then restricting your feeding window. This is something that jumped out on me because I fell into this by accident when I started preparing for things like ultra marathons and endurance events. A lot of the stuff I do now, my background was sport, competitive sport, and then I went into bodybuilding. But I started to restrict my feeding window to try and prepare for things like ultramarathons. But I found that my fat levels massively reduced when I ate everything within an 8 to 10 hour window. Steve, talk a little bit about restricting your feeding window and how that can help when it comes to reducing body fat and getting a six-pack or getting toned abs or just changing your body composition in general.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I kind of grew up like, following the whole bodybuilding diet, right? Which is simply like you have to eat 6 times per day to keep your metabolism, running high. If you skip meals, like your body's going to store body fat. And I was almost like a slave to my diet. I mean, like bringing Tupperware with me, like God forbid I was out for more than 2 hours and I didn't have protein. I thought I was going to lose all my muscle mass. And it was kind of like a ridiculous, way to live. And unfortunately, like it's still, kind of like very common in fitness. And a lot of people still think this and believe this. So when I came across like intermittent fasting, I'll be honest, in the beginning, I really didn't agree with it. I didn't see how it was possible that someone could go, an extended period of time without consuming anything and, eat all of their calories within like a certain time frame and still get the benefits of building muscle and dropping body fat. So I first started probably about 5 years ago now. And one thing I realized is that it actually worked really well with my schedule, because when I wake up in the morning, like I'm really not hungry anyway, right? So, now what I do is I wake up, I have some coffee, and first thing I do is go to the gym and train on an empty stomach. And I feel a lot better doing it that way. And I think for a lot of people, myself included, it's so much more freeing knowing that you can consume calories on your terms, right? Because let's face it, a lot of people have busy days with work or school, and not everyone has the ability to just stop what they're doing and go get a meal, right? But if I tell you, for example, hey, as long as you eat your 2,000 calories every single day, like it really doesn't matter, how many meals a day you eat. It doesn't matter, what foods you're eating. As long as you hit those numbers and hit your calories, like you could have one big meal per day if you want, right? Or you could split that up into 2 meals or 3 meals. And it really allows people to have some more control around their calories. And plus, too, when you're eating in a condensed eating window, you're going to be fuller because you're just going to be eating more food volume in one sitting as well, right? So for me, I like sitting down and having bigger meals. Like typically my meals are about 1,000 calories per meal, and I eat, about twice a day. And I feel like I'm cheating on my diet every day, and I love it. But as long as I hit my calories every day, it's like that's all that really matters, right? So people that have never done it before and they start doing it, they'll 9 out of 10 times like they stick with it for the long term and they love it. And it's really been like a lifestyle for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of an addictive eating style because it gives you a lot of freedom, especially if you train fasted in the morning, which is something that I do consistently as well. Again, we'll come back to this because it's in part 3 of the book in terms of a tip. And again, I'm a big fan schedule wise. And of course, some people can't train fasted. They prefer to eat. But as someone that's found it really personally beneficial, I'm an advocate of it. Peter, talk about the importance then of staying flexible, because I think that kind of ties in nicely when it comes to, Steve said that he feels like he's cheating by finding something that works for him, which is clearly restricting his feeding window to a couple of meals, and it doesn't feel like he's holding anything back from himself. And I think staying flexible is nearly another side of that coin. It may not be restricting your feeding window, it may come in different shapes and forms, but talk about the importance of staying flexible with nutrition.
Yeah, I think too many people try to do these cookie cutter kind of diet programs, even cookie cutter like intermittent fasting programs. And I think the whole thing is that I honestly believe that every single human should have a personalized diet, is a variation of like the food choices, as well as like when they're eating and how much they're eating. Like personally, I usually eat like quite a big meal in the middle of the day around lunchtime. I try to have like 100 grams protein in like a single serving. And then the rest of the day, I'll backload my carbs. But that works for me. I don't do too much intermittent fasting, but I've also done like hundreds of different diets and trials and error in terms of like what I eat, what I don't eat. I've done blood tests, and this is kind of what works for me. And that's the whole point about being flexible, is that I think you do need to like test your way to the optimal diet for you. And again, going back to like one of our mindset laws about defining success before you chase it, you want to create that diet and that training program based on your current goal. If you're kind of in a bulking season or a muscle building season, you want to alter your diet and your training to that. And that's all about the kind of flexibility that we talk about here.
Yeah, I think it's so important, whether it's a flexible approach to your nutrition with including foods that you enjoy, or the flexibility in your ability to test different strategies, because different things work for different people. As you mentioned there, intermittent fasting works for you, Steve. It doesn't work so well for you, Peter. So you're looking to try and find different things for everybody that's listening, what's going to support your end goal, because you're very clear, if you're following the rules from the book, you're very clear of the laws from the book, you're very clear that this is what I'm looking to do, but you're being flexible in your approach and how to get there. Whatever you can be consistent with at the end of the day is going to be the most important thing. In Rule 32, you talk about refeeds, and I think this is something that a lot of people in the fitness industry, all the way from absolute beginners to below advanced trainers, I would say, have a little bit of a misconception around refeeds and how they actually work. But in Law 32, you talk about refeed, don't cheat. Can you explore that a little bit for us, Stephen? Because I think this is a useful approach, especially when fat loss is the goal. And also, again, I have a little bit of a pet peeve myself when it comes to cheat as the word. I always say free meal. You know, I don't generally separate foods into good and bad categories, but fat loss is it's a little bit different. There's higher calorie foods that won't support that goal, and lower calorie options, nutrient dense options tend to be better. But talk about how a refeed versus cheating can help when body composition or fat loss is the goal.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, a refeed day really just simply means like you're just eating a little bit more calories. I mean, some people would say, eating like your maintenance calories, which simply means, obviously losing weight, you have to be in a calorie deficit, right? So typically people will eat, like 500 calories less, than their maintenance calories, and that will put them in a pretty good deficit. When you eat at your maintenance calories, you're pretty much just consuming, the same amount of calories that you're burning per day. So for me, for example, I probably burn like 3,000 to 3,500 calories a day, with activity. That's just what my body burns typically. So if I have a refeed day, I'm going to be consuming about 3,000 to 3,500 calories per day. But that doesn't mean that I'm just going to be eating burgers and fries and treat it like a cheat day to where I'm just going crazy, right? That's the biggest thing and the biggest issue I see with a lot of people is that, they wait all week for that one cheat day, but you could do a lot of damage to your body in one day of just over consumption, right? So when you structure it more this way, what it allows you to do is really just have a little bit more calories, right? Typically, I'll just increase my carbohydrate intake a little bit and really just listen to my body, because when you're in a prolonged deficit for an extended period of time, your body's hormones are going to start pushing back on it. Your ghrelin levels, your leptin levels, which are your hunger signaling hormones, that will tell your brain, hey, we need some food, right? So by doing a strategic refeed day, maybe once per week or twice per week, it just allows your body to kind of relax, reduce cortisol levels, and really reassure your body that you're not in a prolonged starvation, right? And two, just for the mental benefits as well. Like if I tell someone, they could have 1 or 2 refeed days per week and, have some more food and feel full and feel satisfied. Well, that's going to do great things for their mental, their mental health, their emotional health. It's just going to help with recovery. A lot of times what I see is if I give a client a refeed meal, their body weight will actually drop the next day because they're not stressed. They're not just, overwhelmed with the scale weight. They give their body, a little bit more calories, and their body is able to shed a little bit more water. So, refeed days is just, there's a lot more structure to it. And again, you're just increasing your calories, a little bit to just, help aid in recovery and just, again, stay a little bit fuller and help your body along in the fat loss process.
Yeah, it's such great advice. One of the analogy I use with my clients is if you think of your metabolism like a fire, that, if you're in a deficit for way too long, consuming too little calories, and you just don't feel as good, it's like letting a fire die down. But the best way to keep a fire bright is, throw a log on it as you go along. That's kind of like a metabolic refeed, So I think it's so important for people to understand. When it comes to things like calorie deficits and refeeds, I think they're brilliant. Obviously, calorie deficit is the foundation pyramid of fat loss in terms of the thing you need to do. Strategic refeeds is something that can help you sustain it over the long term. But something that can hold a lot of people back, Peter, is drinking their calories. And it's amazing how many people can reduce X amount of calories per day just by not drinking them. Talk about not drinking your calories.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when we were writing this chapter, we were at Starbucks, and we would see people come in and order the frappuccinos, right? And we were looking at the calories, and it was like 700 calories for these small frappuccinos, and people would just gulp them down in 5 minutes. Then they'd also get the breakfast sandwich and everything else. And the thing is, they wouldn't feel full. And there's like 700 calories. And if you're like a small woman, that's a good, like maybe 50% of your daily calories. And the thing is about liquid calories, they don't create those, they don't incite those satiating hormones in the body. And that's why drinking your calories is so dangerous. And it's, again, why, like, I think that even if you just use this one rule, just don't drink your calories, if you switch from like Coke to Diet Coke, people have lost, I mean, Steven, I know your clients probably have lost 10, 20 pounds just switching from regular Coke to Diet Coke. And it's, again, this idea of like drinking calories doesn't create fullness, and it creates just unnecessary, body fat storage.
Yeah, it's amazing how much you can drop. Most soda cans, I know it's a little bit different in the States, you can get a lot bigger cans, but in Ireland and the UK, it's about 140 calories per can, and it's just empty calories. Like, it's just it's sugar for the most part. And so I think that alone is just so helpful, and you're definitely going to have a few people with eureka moments who are listening going, oh my God, I actually didn't think of that. Particularly the Frappuccinos in Starbucks. I got a Landon the first time they started putting up those calories too. I used to live in California, and I was like, there's 700 calories in this drink. I was like, oh my God. One of the things that jumped out at me, one of my favorite sections, because as somebody that has a background in nutrition, been working with people for years, certified nutritionist, I love the message in the book in terms of it's layering ideas, like I talked about the calories on top of the protein, and then using tools like restricted feeding windows and staying flexible. But something that I didn't think about, which I really like and have applied since I read the book, again, one of the lucky ones who had a kind of an early advanced copy of the book. It's available for everybody now when you're listening to this podcast, so you can go and get it. But it was Law 34, which is take a smoker's break after you eat. Talk about that one, Steve.
Yeah, so this is something a lot of people don't really think about. And even myself included, this is something I've always struggled with. So I always tell people, it's like, after you eat, you just want to go for like a nice, 5 to 10 minute walk to allow your body to just really digest the food that you just consumed, right? Because most people, when you eat a meal or eat a bigger meal, it's like, what do? You eat and then you go sit on the couch or you sit down, and that food is just, really sitting in your stomach, right? So I mean, there's been so many scientific studies backing this up that when you go for like a 5 to 10 minute walk after you eat, it just helps your body digest the food so much more efficiently. And it even helps insulin, increased insulin sensitivity. So, it helps better with partitioning the calories and the nutrients that you just consumed, from the food. It helps to shuttle those nutrients into the right places, into your muscle to replenish muscle glycogen if you're working out every day. It just helps your body to operate more efficiently and more optimally. And, again, for someone that works out, every day consistently, like I want my body to have really good digestion and optimal digestion, because a lot of people, when you eat food, it's like, you want that food to be utilized in the best and most effective way possible, right? So when you go for a walk after you consume a meal, it's like the benefits are outstanding.
Yeah, and even you're giving yourself a time to feel full. I've definitely been a victim of that, where you keep eating and eating and eating, and then you eat to the point of fullness where you're like, oh, I ate too much. Whereas if you go for a walk when you're feeling kind of that 70-80% full, you come back 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, and you're like, oh, actually, I don't need to eat anymore. I feel really good now. And you're not feeling full. You're not feeling bloated. You're not feeling like there's a problem with digestion. So I love that one. That's one, lads, that I let you know that I've personally been doing since you told me. My dog has been getting loads of walks since, because I've been going out for 10-minute walks after meals. But I want to transition into training now. And Peter, we'll come to you on this one. There's a lot of stuff here that I think is really beneficial from people, and breaking down definitely what I think are misconceptions in the fitness and health industry on, definitely things like overdoing cardio when it comes to fat loss. I think that's a big one. But before we go on to the cardio element, talk about why it's important to focus on building muscle.
Yeah, as we know, muscle is one of the biggest, increases of metabolic, how much you burn every day. Beyond that, the only way to look good naked is to really have a good amount of muscle. If you're not focused on building muscle, well, as you're dieting, your body will be like, oh, we're not using it, so we're just going to lose it. And you start to lose that muscle mass. But when you lose that muscle mass, the amount of calories you can burn every day goes down. So then you have to keep kind of playing this game where like you have to eat less food to lose more weight, but then you start losing muscle. So you have to keep eating less food to lose more weight until you get to a point where like you're eating so little food that like you don't know what to do. Right. And that's kind of why we say to focus on building muscle and keeping that strength, keeping that muscle mass, so that you can continue to kind of burn and stoke the furnace of your metabolism and really push the fat loss to the next level.
Yeah, and I'm going to bring in another analogy, but I think this one's very applicable to you, Peter, based on some of the content that you put out online and the website, that I use building muscle, like making money while you sleep, for people when fat loss is the goal. Like when you lift weights or do resistance training and building muscle tissue, whether you're a guy or a girl, you burn more calories at rest, which means you're burning more body fat potentially at rest. And it's like the equivalent of making money while you sleep. And I think a lot of people miss that trick when their goal shifts to fat loss. A lot of people know that, oh, I want to get bigger, I want to build muscle, but also I think it's important when fat loss and body composition in general, try to look better, is the end goal. You want to focus on building muscle. Steve, talk about metabolic resistance training then and how that ties into building muscle.
Yeah. So, I mean, just to kind of piggyback on the weight training element, right? So like when I first started my weight loss journey, almost 20 years ago, I didn't really have any knowledge or any, experience on the subject, right? So like you said before, all I did was I just overdid cardio, right? But the problem I found was that as I started to lose, a lot of weight, I just looked like a smaller, softer, skinnier, fat version of myself, right? So that's what kind of led me into the gym and led me to start weight training, because I'm like, okay, you know what? I want to start building up some lean muscle tissue underneath the body fat. This way, when I finally do reach my goal weight, I actually look like someone that's fit and in shape and athletic, and and my metabolism and my overall health is in a much stronger position as well, right? So, going through training over the years, I started, doing primarily bodybuilding type splits and bodybuilding style training. And then I got into CrossFit, and I kind of went back and forth between the two. And one thing I realized is that, listen, most people don't want to be in the gym for hours a day, right? Myself included. I want to get in the gym, train for 45 to 60 minutes max, and then get out and start my day, right? So metabolic resistance training is really just the process of lifting weights, but, doing it fast, right? This way, you're keeping your rest periods in between sets, pretty short, like 30 seconds to 45 seconds in between sets. This way, your heart rate is elevated the entire time you're training. Because what you see is a lot of people, they go into the gym. Of course, everyone has their phone on them, right? So they might do a set of bench press, then they play on their phone for 10 minutes, then they do another set. Well, it's like, as far as fat burning or burning calories, that style of training is, I hate to say it, but it's kind of a waste of time, right? Like your heart rate isn't going to be elevated. Your body temperature isn't going to be elevated. You're not going to be burning many calories. So one thing I try to communicate to people is, listen, get in the gym, keep your intensity level high, keep your keep your rest periods relatively short, 30 to 45 seconds. This way, when you're done with your training, like your heart rate is up. You've probably burned, 500 to 700 calories, and you almost got somewhat of a cardio workout in, right? So metabolic resistance training is almost combining, weight training with a cardio element as well.
That's great advice. I think one of the things I get asked a lot, and I'm sure both of you are the same based on the content that you put out on Instagram in particular, is, Brian, what's your favorite fitness advice or fitness gadget for the gym? It's like, is it a heart rate variability band or a Garmin or Fitbit watch? And I'm like, a stopwatch. I'm like, bring a stopwatch. I was like, and time your rest periods, get off your phone, use 30 to 45 to 60 seconds rest, and get out. And just the simplicity of that to keep your workout intense is so important for people. So I absolutely love that advice. Talk about, Peter, then the importance of compound lifts, because I think that another misconception that people have, very similar to the myth of, if I build muscle, I'll get big and bulky. I know a lot of my females, a lot of my girls will have that misconception. Thankfully, after 350, 360 episodes of the podcast, it's considerably less now for the most majority of people. But talk about the importance of compound lifts and how they can actually help when it comes to reducing body fat, building a six-pack or getting your six-pack, and just changing your body comp in general.
Yeah, I think there's two facets to the compound lifts, and one of them is when you use compound lifts, it kind of means that you're using multiple muscle groups in the body. And by doing that, that means you're saving time, which means also you're working out your body much, much more difficult, which leads into kind of the second point, which is the energy expenditure ramp up. And by doing compound lifts, the energy expenditure for when you're kind of doing pull-ups versus when you're doing like a lateral...
like a lateral pull down. Yeah. Like a lat pull down on a machine. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So the difference there is massive in terms of energy expenditure. They've done tons of studies on it. But the point being that compound movements help increase energy expenditure in a minimal amount of time, which means that if you're working out for 15 minutes and you're doing compound movements, you're going to burn that much more calories, thus more body fat. But the third point to this will be that compound movements incite more hormonal output in the body, specifically growth hormone. Because when you do compound movements, you tend to elicit more lactic acid. And for the body to clear lactic acid from the muscles, you need to have growth hormone. Consider it like the janitor for the lactic acid. And the more growth hormone you have, the side effect is like extreme fat burning. And that's why compound movements are so effective at kind of toning down, building muscle, etc.
Yeah, I think a thing that people will think is growth hormone, they go the opposite direction. They think you're going to get bigger, you're going to get massive. It's actually the reverse of that. It can make you very, very lean, and it's really important. I know you talk about this. We probably won't dive in this today about knowing your hormones. It's later on in the book, and I think understanding that is really important. And just to kind of piggyback on that, because I think it brings the weight training, compound lifts, metabolic resistance, building muscle full circle, progressive overload. This is something that I think is so underutilized when it comes to people just looking to improve their body composition in general. Think fat loss, think building muscle, because progressive overload is just a tool that's very straightforward, very easy for people to follow, yet a lot of people don't do it. Steve, can you talk to us about progressive overload?
Yeah, so this is a really important topic, because one thing I see, and you've probably noticed this as well, being involved in fitness for years, is like you go to the gym and you see, typically if you go to the gym at the same time every day, you generally see the same people you see every day there. And, most people, like, their bodies never really change, right? I mean, they're in the gym every day, they're there, but they're like, you're not seeing any type of improvements, right? That, the reason is twofold, right? Probably because their nutrition is off, but like a lot of people, they're not actually pushing themselves in the gym, right? And like my intention every time I step into the gym, once my headphones go on, like I'm in my own little world, right? And I'm gonna go pretty intense and go pretty hard. And a part of that is challenging myself every single time, every single workout. Like I want to be getting, just a little bit stronger. I want to be able to push that weight a little bit harder. And that really is what progressive overload is. It's just, doing a little bit more than you did last time. Now, in terms of weights, a lot of people, when they hear progressive overload, that means just, putting like 5 pounds more on the bar, this workout versus the last workout, right? Trying to bench 5 pounds more this week than you did last week. And that's one facet of it. But another facet of progressive overload too is like maybe just increasing the time under tension, right? So if you're not able to increase the weight, well, you know what? Why don't you slow the set down, slow the reps down, and maybe just work on the negative a little bit more. Maybe do a 2 count, or increase the tempo of the rep just to keep the muscle overloaded for a little bit longer than you did last week, right? Because let's face it, with progressive overload, it's like if you continue to add 5 pounds to your bench every single week for the past 10 years, you would be benching 1,000 pounds, which isn't really isn't possible, right? So there are different ways to affect progressive overload. Like I said, you could increase the weight a little bit each time. You can reduce your rest periods each time, or you could just increase the time under tension of the muscle. So using the same weight, but just really slowing down the rep to make sure you're overloading the muscle. All of these, factors, will definitely help to shock your body a little bit, to recruit new muscle fibers, and, to really grow new muscle tissue.
Yeah, I think when it comes to progressive overload, don't think of it as jacking up the weight all the time. Think of it as progressing in some capacity. You're overloading, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going from, a 20 kilo or 20 pound squat to a 40 pound, or 25 in this case, where you're gradually going up. It might be just changing up the tempo, or changing up something to progress and get your body doing something that it hasn't been doing under a different load. I think looking at it that way can be really helpful, because I think it's a very underutilized tool. Peter, I'm going to come back to you for the 800-pound gorilla in the room when it comes to fat loss, and that's cardio. And something that I think a lot of people will be aware of is that you'd need some form of cardio, or let me rephrase, it's helpful to have some form of cardio in a fat loss plan, particularly in your training program, because cardio burns calories, and burning more calories can potentially support a caloric deficit, which can help reduce your body fat. But talk about not overdoing cardio.
Yeah, I think the misconception is that people think they can out-train a bad diet. I think we talked about this in the book. I forget which law it was, but the point being that cardio, it's good in doses, but too much of it causes, a spike in cortisol, which is a huge, kind of a lever to start eating muscle in the body. And, as we know, when we start losing muscle, our metabolism starts to slow down, and then we can have to eat less food to lose more weight. Beyond that, when you start increasing cardio quite a bit, your hunger hormones also get jacked up. And that makes it a lot more difficult to kind of stay on your diet and keep on track with your calories, especially if you're in like kind of a 500 calorie deficit every day. And that's why we kind of say, like maybe 3 20-minute sessions a week of cardio is kind of the maximum that we kind of prescribe, or at least that I prescribe. And beyond that, I mean, it's just about like kind of walking the rest of the way to the fat loss. But you should be creating your calorie deficit from your diet, not necessarily from your cardio or for walking.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, I think it's law 52, walk it out, where you're hitting step counts, walking more, moving more. Like, I think there's a lot to be said for, neat activity, non-exercise activity, thermogenesis, where you're just burning calories by moving. I'm recording this podcast at a standing desk, which is something that compounds very positively over time. And I think those little hacks are really useful for people. Lads, there's 77 laws in the book, and for everyone listening, knowing my audience as well as I do, there's something in here nearly for everybody, whether it's the supplements, the rest and recovery, the success laws that we haven't touched on yet. But for just the training, nutrition and mindset section alone, I think it's going to help so many people. So I've got one final question for both of you, and Steve, we'll start with you before you can tell everybody where's the best place to pick up the book, where to follow you online. But Steve, what's your favorite law of all the 77, assuming it's not one we've touched on already?
Oh man, that's a tough question.
What's your favorite kid question? I know, but
I mean, listen, I'll be honest, and I know this isn't one of the laws, but I would just say my favorite section is the mindset section. And, really the reason for that is because being almost 100 pounds overweight, like, I understand the struggles a lot of people deal with when it comes to starting a fitness journey. I mean, I've struggled with, eating disorders, like, binge eating, stress eating, emotional eating. I've seen, professionals and eating therapists for that specific reason. And, one of the biggest feedback I hear from people and hear from clients and people trying to lose weight is that they have an emotional relationship with food, right? And again, that really begins in the mind, right? How you view yourself, how you view the food you're eating. These are all factors that are greatly going to affect if you're ever going to be successful on your fitness journey, right? Because like I said before, anyone could eat less food, anyone can move their body more, but are you able to change the relationship and change the views that you have of food long term? That's really the key. So again, the emotional side of things, the mindset side of things, the mental side of things is something that I've never really heard spoken about up until this book that me and Peter put together. And I think it provides people the foundation to go into something knowing that, I can do this. I just have to shift my identity. I have to shift my mindset, and I can be successful because, again, Peter went through this process himself. He was overweight. I was overweight. So, again, this book was written for us. And I know that, the mental side of things, the mindset side of things is just a crucial element to someone being successful. So sorry, I wasn't able to give you an exact law, but I think the entire mindset section is definitely my favorite.
Yeah, no, I agree. Long-term listeners of the podcast know that when it comes to nutrition and training, that I will regularly say that once the mindset is right, the body will follow. So I think that whole section is so helpful for people. As I said at the top of the podcast, I love that that's how he started it, and that's what everything is built upon. What about you, Peter? Do you have a specific law in terms of something that jumps out at you the most, or something that you've kind of got the most attachment to? Or are you, it's going to be a section as well. I'll let you go whatever direction you want with it.
Yeah, I love the supplement stuff. I think there's a lot of like micronutrient deficiencies in the world, especially with like the low quality soil erosion and like oxygen levels declining over the world. But of all the laws, I think law number 70 is actually my favorite, and it's called make a not to do list. And the reason I think that's my baby is that, to get to kind of success, whatever your definition of success is, like half the battle is doing what you're supposed to do. Do a little bit of cardio, do your weight training, do your dieting. But the other half of the battle is not fucking up, right? And so basically, as long as you can not fuck up, you have this straight line to success, and creating this not to-do list. Like, I won't cheat on the weekend. I'm not going to drink like 4 glasses of wine at dinner. I'm going to get up every morning. I'm not going to, be obsessive about my calories to the minutia 1 calorie level. All those things keep you on that straight line to success and get you to your end goal faster. And as long as you're kind of doing what you need to do and not fucking up, you'll get there very quickly.
I love that. That reminds me of a Charlie Munger quote that you'd be surprised at how far in life you'd get ahead if you just did less stupid things. And I think the not to do list and not fucking up is such a great way to finish, because identifying that and making that aware first and foremost can be really, really important. And then when you wrap your identity around where you're trying to go and the new person you want to be, and add in the tools and techniques with the training and the nutrition and the supplements to do that, it's a recipe for success. Lads, I love the book. I love what you've done with it. I love this podcast and unpacking just a little bit of the nuggets of gold that are in here. So for everybody listening, Steve, we'll start with you. Tell them where they can either pick up the book. I'll link them all in the show notes and in the description of the podcast. And where's the best place to follow you online, Steve? And then Peter will come to you for the handles and anywhere you want to send people.
Sure. So the best place to actually get the book is going to be on Amazon. It's live. I believe it's going to be live October 5th. So that's going to be the best spot. As far as the best place to reach me is going to be my Instagram. So at Stephen with a PH, STEPHEN, Campolo, CAMPOLO. If anyone has any questions, I try to respond to all my DMs within 24 hours. So I would love to hear from you guys and help in any way I can.
And Peter, where's the best place for people to connect with you?
Yeah, I think just my Instagram is probably great. Just at Peter Tzemis, so PETERTZEMIS. Or you can email me, peter@peterzemis.com. Those are probably two of the best spots.
Brilliant. And for everybody listening, I will put the link for the book in the show notes on briankeenfitness.com. Also, I will link it in the description wherever you are listening to podcasts. Go check out the book. And also, I will link Stephen and Peter's Instagram handles and emails and everything we talked about in today's podcast. So click on through, go check them out, go follow them on Instagram, go check out the book. Stephen, Peter, thank you so much again.
Pleasure, man. Thank you so much, Brian, for having us.
Yeah, thanks, man. That was awesome.
There you have it, Stephen Campolo and Peter Tzemis on fat loss, nutrition principles, managing your mindset for weight loss, and 77 laws of six-pack abs. Super enjoyable conversation. I love how the guys were able to break down a lot of the myths, the misconceptions that are out there when it comes to fat loss, weight loss, body compositional change, or getting your body fat low enough to see your abs, to get a six-pack, or just tone your stomach in general. So I hope you got loads from it. As always, if you did, be sure to take a screenshot and you can pop it up on your Instagram stories. I'm Brian_Keen_fitness, and you can tag Stephen and Peter on there as well. Let us know what you thought. That's all from this week's podcast. Catch you all next Monday.